Hello, welcome to The Drum. I'm John Barron. Coming up, climate change, same-sex marriage and asylum seekers. We'll look back on a week in federal politics dominated by some of the thornier issues of recent years. Is the Nick Kyrgios sledge about much more than sportsmen behaving badly? What does it say about sexism and shaming? And Hillary Clinton may have a new presidential rival as former Vice President Al Gore ponders another run for the White House. And joining me on the panel tonight, Kirsty Needham, the New South Wales political editor for the Sun Herald, author and ABC radio host Dom Knight, and in Canberra, Samantha Maiden, the national political editor for the Sunday Telegraph. And of course, as always, you can join in on Twitter using the hashtag #TheDrum. Well, first to federal politics, and it was a week that began with the federal government hoping the election of a new parliamentary speaker would give them a bit of a chance to reclaim the agenda and perhaps even begin a fight back in the polls. Then came that deep split within coalition ranks over a free vote on same-sex marriage, effectively swamping the announcement of the carbon reduction targets for 2030. And as soon as the Prime Minister proposed a people's vote on marriage equality, cracks reappeared within Cabinet over how and when the vote should be conducted. And then the PM's hand-picked Royal Commissioner Dyson Heydon came under fire for accepting an invitation to address a Liberal Party event. And all of those issues were still swirling around today. Yet, frontbencher Josh Frydenberg says that all in all, it hasn't been a bad week.
I actually think it's been a good week. Now, next week, we'll get on with the job of talking about the issues that matter most to the Australian people, namely jobs and growth.
So, Samantha Maiden, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being business as usual, 10 being a complete and utter disaster, how do you rate this week for the government?
Oh, look, I think it's probably an 11. It's not a great week. Look, I think that Tony Abbott's supporters would argue that this same-sex argument is a winner with the Liberal base, with Conservatives, that they can argue that they are, allowing this democratic vote on whether or not we should have same-sex marriage in Australia. But what we're witnessing with Cabinet is this brief moment in time where there is no Cabinet position on a plebiscite, there is no Cabinet position on a referendum, and those ministers are absolutely free to criticise. We've had George Brandis come out very strongly and really whack Scott Morrison over the idea of a referendum, saying it's not necessary. The High Court has settled that. And, you're really just seeing this all-in brawl, and it's incredible.
Is it as bad as that? I mean, some will argue, of course, that the Liberal and National parties, broad church parties, there will always be differences of opinion. They've had differences in the past on issues like climate change. They're having differences of opinion now, but it's all healthy.
Well, I think that the moderates within the party, and it's not just the moderates, the people who support same-sex marriage reform, really felt that they were ambushed by the Prime Minister. This was not discussed by Cabinet. This was not discussed by the leadership group. Obviously, Warren Inch raised this idea in the party room. Tony Abbott at that stage said, we won't talk about that right now. And then he's asked essentially for a separate party room and just, had this all-in debate that went for hours and hours and hours. Now, he emerged from that essentially then arguing there should be a plebiscite or a referendum, but there was no real party room decision on that either. A couple of people mentioned that as an idea, but it's just led to this incredible divisions and the extraordinary revelations that Christopher Pyne, who has long been regarded as a really strong supporter of the Prime Minister, openly accused him of branch stacking by bringing the Nationals in. It was then revealed that he actually told Warren Truss not to bring his MPs to the meeting. So, I think that's a very unusual circumstance to have Christopher Pyne at odds with the Prime Minister on an issue like this.
6 hours, 6 straight hours on same-sex marriage, like 6 episodes of Q&A back-to-back, except the ministers were allowed to speak this time.
Yeah. Kirsty, do you see this immediately going to the question of leadership, or is the more immediate question functioning government until that becomes an issue, which may not be until after the next election anyway?
I think this was serious for the Abbott leadership. This party room decision on same-sex marriage was a big deal. At the last election, there had been agitation within the Liberal Party to allow a free vote, and Mr Abbott said that after the election that the Liberal Party would make a decision on that. Instead, you see the Prime Minister ambushing, I guess, that party room debate by bringing in the coalition partners. So hence the comments from Christopher Pyne, the strong sentiment that's been spilling over with this week, and the low-level sparring between George Brandis and Scott Morrison. It was poor leadership. I think the Prime Minister looked tricky against his own cabinet. And showed that he's willing to do what it takes to win at any cost. I mean, he obviously believes that going into the next election, same-sex marriage is a political point scorer, that he thinks that he can appeal to the Liberal base. But that's a risk because, I mean, polling and what we've seen around the world in the last 6 to 8 months would suggest that the community's moved on, and perhaps Mr Abbott and his close circle are out of touch, and perhaps he should have been listening to some of his other cabinet ministers and allowed the free vote and allowed this issue to be resolved now.
Did some of that seem to go beyond the political into the personal? There seemed to be a slightly niggling element to some of the toing and froing over whether the Constitution needed to be changed, for instance?
It seems it is nasty niggling that's sort of playing out in the public sphere. I guess what they're debating is, I mean, a referendum is essentially a way to strike down same-sex marriage. The record of referendums in Australia is that they don't succeed. So that's the undercurrent there. Should the Prime Minister push ahead with a way to, I mean, he's calling it going to the people and letting the people decide, but history would suggest it's a way to kill an idea.
Dom, given that, yes, opinion polls suggest that the majority of Australians right now think that marriage equality is a good thing, it's time for that. But if you look at the numbers in the Parliament, they're not there at the moment. 33 votes in the coalition party room. So, you know, and a conscience vote on Labor's side. So, I mean, is there a bit of a sort of time to slow down and actually sort of reappraise the issue?
Well, it's worth noting that what the coalition decided this week was not one way or the other in terms of the vote. It was about how to have the vote, what kind of vote to have. And so the whole question is, should it be a conscience vote or should it not, rather than the substance of the vote. The thing that surprises me a little bit about this is that Tony Abbott is, as a leader, implacably opposed to same-sex marriage. We knew that when he was elected Prime Minister. It's a bit odd that people are so shocked that he's not keen to sort of progress this issue. But look, it is clearly, I mean, Bill Shorten clearly thinks, from what he said this week, that it's a vote winner for him. If it's true that 70% of people support it, all I guess it proves that we are going to be talking about this for the next year, if not longer.
Samantha Maiden, what's your sense of the Dyson Heydon Royal Commission issue that's been around for the last 24 hours or so? Has this got legs? Is this going to become another Bronwyn Bishop-style saga where the Prime Minister has to decide at some point whether to cut his losses, or is this going to be forgotten over the course of the weekend?
Well, I don't think it'll be forgotten. I think the damage is done. I think that the issue for Dyson Heydon is that, you know, there is probably the government would be concerned that there would be some sort of chilling effect on his criticisms potentially of Bill Shorten in the report. And if there's not a chilling effect, whatever he says about Bill Shorten in his report, obviously the Labor Party will be able to run this through the frame of him speaking at a Liberal event. Now, you know, I'm prepared to give Dyson Heydon the benefit of the doubt that he was invited to a prestigious law lecture, the Sir Garfield Barwick address. You know, Murray Gleeson had given it, George Brandis had given it, that he may not have potentially fully understood that it was, you know, the Liberal Party fundraiser. Some people suggest a Liberal Party event. Tony Nutt seemed to suggest that it wasn't going to raise much more money. That's not really the point. The point is that he was speaking at it, and also in the correspondence that was released, he said that he was, you know, not prepared to speak if it was a Liberal Party event now, but was happy to later. So, you know, I think that it is not... you would assume that if Dyson Heydon was going to stand down or suspend himself or resign, that he would have done so by now. He obviously believes that that's not necessary. But I think that, you know, it was definitely quite damaging. And, you know, Bill Shorten's had, you know, a very lucky week.
Well, for another look at the week that was in federal politics, you can head to the Drums website now for an article by the ABC's Barry Cassidy. You might remember a few months back when Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young claimed that she had been followed and even spied upon when she was on a fact-finding trip to Nauru at the end of 2013. Well, this is what Immigration Minister Peter Dutton said.
My experience of Sarah Hanson-Young is that she gets most of the facts wrong most of the time. Generally, she doesn't get her facts right. She makes these allegations which are completely unfounded. And I think Sarah Hanson-Young conducts herself in a way which frankly is an embarrassment to our country.
The Wilson Security Company later admitted that there had been surveillance of Senator Hanson-Young, but also said that Operation Raven, as it was called, had been a rogue action, not authorised by them. But then ABC TV's 7:30 program last night aired an interview with a former guard who says that this was an extensive spying operation and there was a cover-up with extensive use of a paper shredder by Wilson. Greens leader Richard Di Natale today saying that Mr Dutton needs to apologise.
What I was aware of, or what I'd heard from other guys who were involved, was that they were briefed on her room number, the vehicle, and what time she was going to be in and out of the camp. They were also told to follow her, and they were told to keep notes on who she was talking to around the island and in her room.
What the Minister now needs to do is to ensure that, firstly, there is a complete investigation, a full police investigation into this matter. He should apologise for initially ridiculing Senator Sarah Hanson-Young, and unless there is a full, independent police investigation of this matter, then the Minister needs to consider his position.
So, Kirsty, Richard Di Natale saying the federal police should be involved, Peter Dutton should at the very least apologise, but for effectively calling Sarah Hanson-Young a fantasist over a claim which is now apparently checks out.
Look, absolutely he should apologise, but there are more serious things at stake here. If Wilson Security, if it's proven that there were in fact 8 guards involved in this and they were surveilling her in the hotel room, how can they be believed on more serious, or not that this isn't serious, but other serious allegations of child abuse and sexual abuse at those centres? The issue of the AFP investigating, it's a problem because this is offshore. It's the Nauruan government that is the government of the land, so will they allow the AFP to investigate? Who ordered Wilson Security to follow Sarah Hanson-Young? I've been to Nauru and I've stayed at the Menon Hotel. It's a very small place and it's really easy to keep an eye on someone. So eight surveillance officers, that's heavy-handed. They would have been doing it because that hotel is the hotel that the expat staff and Wilson Security staff and detention centre staff all stay at if they're working at the detention centre. So if you're a journalist or if you're a politician wanting to find out what's going on, your best chance of speaking to someone freely is at the hotel, in your room or in the dining facility. So that's why they would have been keeping a close eye on her. It shows the crackdown on whistleblowers that's going on over there, and, you know, some really troubling human rights issues. Yeah,
Dom, the Prime Minister said that this was surveillance for the Senator's safety and well-being and entirely appropriate. That was his comment at the time when this first came out. She said no, it was more sinister than that, it was quite creepy, and that it was, the inference is that they wanted to know who she was going to be talking to and that maybe there'd be repercussions for them. Given that we don't know whose take on this is right, although we know something happened, should we just say, look, leave it up to the police?
Look, there are contending political interests there that I don't really want to go into. But the interesting thing is the atmosphere of secrecy overall. You would think that you know, any facility run by the Australian government or funded by the Australian government offshore, an Australian politician would be allowed to go and check it out and report back on what was going on. That, to me, is the more interesting thing about this, the broader atmosphere of secrecy and potentially the expectation that, you know, security would keep an eye on what's going on. And for journalists, you know, journalists will tell you that if you go to Nauru, it's very hard to get answers, and I think it's very curious to ask about why that atmosphere exists.
And Samantha, not only are we hearing from former guards saying that there is a culture of not just secrecy but also abuse involving some of the guards on Nauru. Is this the kind of thing that really should be in the hands of the police now, do you think?
Well, I mean, it can't be in the hands of the Australian Federal Police. They don't have any jurisdiction over there. Look, I think in terms of the surveillance of Sarah Hanson-Young, I think there clearly sounds to be a bit of a Keystone Cops element to this. You know, there is obviously an issue with parliamentary privilege as well. As a politician, you're not really meant to have people sort of, you know, tailing you and interfering with you going about your work. I don't think it's any surprise that Peter Dutton is critical of Sarah Hanson-Young. She's not exactly what you would call a friend of the government. But, you know, I think that the more substantive and broader issues of whether there is abuse going on at those facilities, of course, that should be investigated. And on the question of an apology to Sarah Hanson-Young from Peter Dutton, is that warranted? Well, I don't think we know the answer to that yet. I mean, you know, the grab that you played was essentially hearsay evidence. It was what someone had said to someone else. You know, obviously those claims should be investigated, but I don't think you should be offering preemptive apologies until you've actually got all the evidence before you. All right, let's turn to one of the other big stories making news today. Australian tennis player Nick Kyrgios has been booed from the court and fined more than $13,000 after yesterday's controversial sledge incident against his opponent, Stan Wawrinka.
Ma réaction, c'est que c'est pas la première fois qu'il a des gros problèmes sur le terrain par rapport à ce qu'il dit, par rapport à comment il acte. J'espère juste que l'ATP vont prendre de grosses décisions contre lui, parce qu'il est jeune peut-être, mais il n'y a aucune excuse. Chaque match, il a des problèmes. Chaque match, il...
You know, he was getting a bit lippy at me, so I don't know. It's just in the moment sort of stuff. But yeah, I didn't really know. I just said it.
Interesting to see what kind of reception he gets into Banque Nationale. And not surprisingly, fair amount of booing, Robbie.
Pretty much what we expected, right? A lot of wolf whistles.
And as well as being fined $13,000, Nick Kyrgios was then bundled out of the Rogers Cup. He later apologised for his outburst on court yesterday, but was still slapped with a further fine, this one for verbal abuse of a ball boy. Attention has now turned as well to the real victim of this sledge, the rising tennis star Donna Vekic, who has suddenly found herself better known for her alleged private life than her tennis. Joining us on the panel tonight is former professional tennis player, now commentator and coach, Louise Plemming. Louise, welcome to The Drum. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, with Nick Kyrgios, on the one hand, he's an incredibly talented young player. Australians would like to get behind him, but he's acting like a bit of a lair. Is your sympathy with him for being a 20-year-old under all this pressure and scrutiny, or you think that, you know, he really needs to pull his head in?
Look, there's no question. I think everybody is really disappointed with Nick's behaviour. And I actually don't think it's an age thing. I think it's something that Nick has had a challenge with his whole very short career, but even as a junior, he really struggled with his emotions and I guess the impulse control, really. When he either gets upset or angry or he feels his emotions rising, he just loses it. And, you know, speaks before he thinks, and this is just continually getting himself into a lot of trouble. Having been a player, having worked in coaching as well, how do you take that and rather than just trying to calm it all down, channel it into playing better? Because there, you know, there are players of the past, the McEnroes, the Connors, the Ilie Nastasis, who would get themselves fired up and get them to a new level of performance because of that emotion. Yeah, there's no question. I think we want to embrace his animated style. He's really a unique young player. He's fantastic. The ATP, in many ways, absolutely love Nick because he really connects with the youth. And we see a lot of players that are getting older now, you know, Federer and Nadal and Djokovic. These players are getting older. So we do want to see these young characters coming through. But obviously we want the message for them to be a very positive one as well for the young players that are coming through. And everyone's parents, I think you want to really follow a player that you can say to your child, great values, you know, what a great sportsman, you know, is that player. So that's where I think, obviously, Tennis Australia are working really hard to mentor the group that he is with, the management, and we've given a lot of advice, psych help, a lot of different help that Tennis Australia has done over the years. It's just, I think it's a matter of maturity for Nick, and I think he just has to go on that journey and feel the pain. When he walked off the court today, I think he felt the pain, everyone booing him.
Do you think that is he responsible solely for his actions and for the attitude towards women that was implied, for instance, by the comments and the comments that his brother has made since on social media as well? Is this just a problem with some young men, or is there any kind of a cultural issue on the tour with treatment of women that we should know about?
No, I don't think so. I think this is a very individual case. I think Nick, again, just didn't think, shot his mouth off before his brain was really thinking, and I honestly think he really feels horrible about this. And of course Donna is the one that's the innocent one caught up in this, and I have not seen this at all on the tour. This is very irregular. This is just Nick putting his foot in it.
Do you think social media and just the stream of consciousness that generation has in their tweeting and Facebooking is sort of making this a little bit more difficult? Because it wasn't just what was said on court, it was what their family then said on social media that then, of course, everyone can read and amplify and sort of shows context or intent.
Absolutely, and I think parents have a big role to play in this, and perhaps whatever's happening on the couch at home maybe isn't quite the right message for Nick, but certainly I think every parent, you know, that's where you really want to be mentoring, educating, and if something happens like this, I think they need to take a little bit of a harder line.
I'm not sure how generational it is. Have you read Rupert Murdoch's Twitter feed? But it is interesting, though, to sort of wonder how we get from here to him being embraced by the Australian people. We love a champion, we love a promising young player, but if he's going to say stuff like this, isn't there a bit of a difficult road back into the public's hearts from here? How does he walk that road?
Absolutely. I think it's the Australian public are a tough one. They don't like to see this behaviour. However, we have embraced other athletes in the past. Shane Warne has put his foot in it many times, and we love him. We love his character. We love the fact that he's different. We don't want to see vanilla athletes. There's no question about that, but we want to see good behaviour. And Nick is going to have to work at this, and if he doesn't, I think sponsors and there's going to be different people that will give him the hard line and walk away from him, and it'll be a tough journey for him.
Is there a double standard here? Because we did, effectively as a nation, if not condone, we certainly tolerated the success of our Australian cricket team when they were world champion sledges as well as a world champion cricket team. But when it's one-on-one, is that the difference, that it seems a lot more personal when it's being muttered across a net?
Yeah, absolutely. The spotlight is on two individuals on a tennis court, and I think we look at a cricket team and there's so many more, and collectively that kind of dissipates whatever their message is. It just kind of blends in. But as an athlete, particularly in an individual sport, you become your voice is your brand, and you have to be extremely careful, and that's where he really needs to be educated, and he has to learn that what he says is just so important because it just doesn't get erased quickly. And
it's not just Donna Vekic who's been a victim in this case as well. Not for the first time. He's had a go at the kids who are there acting as ball boys. I mean, that is a whole other area of, what's he doing?
Yeah, look, it's just unacceptable behaviour. But again, it's his release valve, I think. He just does not know how to manage what's bubbling inside of him. He's an extremely animated, very athletic, a really interesting character. He's like a tiger out there on the court, and sometimes he needs to channel that energy in a better way. And that's a part of the management, that's a part of the psychological help that he needs to get, and he needs to have a plan in place. He's got to, when he feels that the bubbling and the anxiety or the anger or whatever it is starts to come up, he needs to have ABC.
Sounds like he needs a good coach. Louise Pleebing, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Well, while all of the attention in the US presidential contest has been focused on the rather surprising success of Donald Trump, on the other side of the aisle, the Democrats have got a few worries of their own right now. Frontrunner Hillary Clinton has slipped behind one of her rivals in the crucial early voting state of New Hampshire, and today come reports that former Vice President Al Gore is weighing his options and may join the race for the White House. Mike Clay reports.
Good evening. Just moments ago, I spoke with George W. Bush and congratulated him on becoming the 43rd President of the United States.
Al Gore. He's probably the most famous Beat to never make it to the Oval Office.
That's good.
He's a man who drops inconvenient truth bombs from atop a cherry picker, and now rumours are flying he might mount a third tilt at the White House.
Well, this calls for a celebration. I will.
If he does, the man now known as the face of climate activism will fling zingers like these at his Democrat rivals.
We've made some progress during the last 8 years, but I'll make you one promise here. You ain't seen nothing yet.
Them's fighting words. But a lot's changed since Al Gore strode the halls of the West Wing.
Big money has now perverted our democracy, hacked it, taken it over, and twisted it to serve the purposes of special interest.
If that's so, then why would he want another go on that merry-go-round? As George W. says,
there's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
And Al Gore lost to that guy. Mike Clay reporting. So, should Vice President Gore be tossing his hat into the ring again? And Sam Maiden, should Democrats be worried that Hillary Clinton is being given a run for her money by a 73-year-old socialist named Bernie?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just think it's all gotten even crazier since the whole Donald Trump situation, but I can't really see a Biden sort of... Can you really put him as president? It doesn't seem to me like a good idea.
Biden, Gore... May as well go Fritz Mondale next, don't you think, Dom?
Well, look, it's a strange situation because you've got a front runner who is so far ahead in Hillary Clinton, and you can mention Bernie Sanders, but the chances are next to zero, really. And in terms of the
Bernie
money,
is now in front in New Hampshire,
but they're ornery in New Hampshire. But look, so it will almost certainly be Hillary. Except, what if there's some scandal? What if there's an issue with the email server? If no one else serious is in the ring, that's when you want a Biden or a Gore to step up. That said, if you want someone to beat yet another member of the Bush family, would you really go to Al Gore, given his track record?
So who should be the plan B?
Well, it's fascinating. I don't know who the other... They're all staying out of the way. I mean, people like Elizabeth Warren, but she's staying out of the way to give Hillary a run. Everyone is. But as soon as Hillary falls over, then you'll see some other Democrats, I suppose,
But is that too late, though? Do they need to get the plan B in place
by the
now?
convention, you're right.
And it's I mean, the email thing, it does seem to be getting serious. There's quite a number of judges have ordered probes now. And you can sort of, I mean, whether or not...
The FBI's poking around in the server, I think.
Whether or not that damages her in the public eye. I mean, national securities. I mean, if there's a problem there, that could be a problem to her chances. I mean, with the Al Gore suggestion, I mean, it's almost like Democrats wargaming. Well, he's a celebrity we can throw up against Donald Trump, and seems as unlikely.
Instant candidate, just out election. If we need him.
Yeah, celebrity appeal.
An inconvenient Trump. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But Al Gore, he managed to lose an almost unlosable election in 2000. He wasn't a great candidate. Why are they thinking of him again?
Well, his celebrity's grown since then. I mean, we saw the Simpsons clip, The Inconvenient Truth. He's the climate change campaigner. So if you're banking on that having appeal to a Democratic voting public, then that's a winner. And his popularity is a lot bigger. Yeah.
All right then. Well, as you know, I could talk about this all night, but we are getting towards the end of the drum for another day. Thanks to our panel, Kirsty Needham, Dom Knight and Samantha Maiden in Canberra. abc.net.au/the drum for more analysis over the weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Bye now.